3 children, all born minutes apart, all vanished in a single night. And for 20 years, no one could explain how. No footprints, no signs of struggle, no ransom note, just a storm rolling in, and 3 sleeping cribs left empty by morning. They were called the Lost Triplets of Larkspur County. And for 2 decades, their names lived only in whispers and cold case files, until their older brother, the one who'd always blamed himself, returned to their childhood home and made a discovery that would horrify the world. Welcome to Uncommon Stories. If this story stays with you, hit subscribe and tell me where you're watching from and when the truth found you. Now let's begin. Larkspur County, North Carolina, August 3rd, 1987. The sky turned black by sunset. Not just dim, black, like someone had laid a sheet over the stars. Meteorologists called it a flash cyclone, a freak weather event that would drown half the county in less than 4 hours. But for the Delaney family, it was supposed to be just another night. The triplets, Emma, Eliza, and Eli, had just turned 4, identical in looks, inseparable in spirit. Their big brother, Nathan, was 11. He liked comic books and storm-chasing documentaries. And that night, he sat by the window counting thunderclaps as the rain hammered the roof. The Delaney home sat on the edge of the woods, a white farmhouse that creaked when the wind blew too hard. It had no basement, no storm cellar, just a crawl space beneath the floorboards, and an attic full of old boxes. At 8:15 p.m., the power went out. Darlene, the triplets' mother, lit candles. Henry, their father, checked the radio. Nathan remembers looking to the hallway and seeing all 3 toddlers asleep in the same bed, curled up like puppies under a single blanket. He would later say it was the last time he ever saw them alive. By 6:10 a.m., the storm had passed, and the silence in the house felt unnatural. Not the peaceful kind. The hollow kind, like something had been taken. Darlene walked into the children's room, expecting to find tangled hair and mourning grumbles. Instead, she found an empty bed, no sign of struggle, no wet footprints, no broken locks. The window was slightly open, just enough to let in the smell of wet pine. The triplets were gone. Henry called the sheriff. Nathan threw on his raincoat and ran into the woods, screaming their names. But the trees gave no answer, just birds, and the sound of branches dripping water like tears. The search lasted 11 days. Dogs, volunteers, boats dredging nearby lakes. Nothing. No shoes, no fabric, no blood. Investigators were baffled. If the children had wandered off, where were the signs? If they'd been taken, how had no one heard or seen anything? If someone entered the house that night, why didn't they take anything else? Suspicion turned inward. Some thought it was Nathan. At just 11, he was questioned 6 times in the span of 2 months. Asked if he'd ever hurt them, if he'd felt jealous, if he'd left the door unlocked. He always said no. He always cried when he said it. Others pointed at the parents. Was it a custody battle? Postpartum trauma? An accident they tried to cover? The sheriff's department interrogated Henry and Darlene separately. Both passed polygraphs. Neither had a criminal record. No signs of abuse. But something still didn't sit right. The house was inspected. No secret entrances. No crawlspace activity. No blood. The storm, they said, had erased everything. If there had been a crime, the rain had washed it clean. The triplets' photos were posted in every gas station in Larkspur, then every church, then every highway exit. Years passed. The flyers faded. The names were still whispered, but no one expected to find them anymore. By 1992, the case had gone cold. Nathan was 16, and he refused to speak to reporters. Not because he didn't want to tell the story, but because he didn't believe anyone could understand it. He told one teacher, "I feel like I hear them sometimes. In the walls, in the attic, but maybe that's just what guilt sounds like." By 2000, both parents had died. Car crash on an icy road. No foul play suspected. Nathan, now in his mid-20s, inherited the old farmhouse. He refused to live there. Let it rot. Let the weeds swallow it. He moved across the country. Started over. Got a degree. Tried to forget. But forgetting is a trick the mind only plays on itself. The heart remembers, especially the parts it never understood. In 2007, 20 years after the storm, Nathan returned. Not to live, to demolish. He said he couldn't take it anymore. The house was falling apart. The neighbors complained. And every time he looked at a photo of his siblings, he saw ghosts. He arrived alone, hammer in hand, memory in pieces. On the second day, he began tearing down the attic walls. Behind one panel, he found something strange, a small square of wallpaper, not matching the rest, and beneath it, a panel of sheetrock that didn't belong. He smashed through it, and what he found on the other side would unravel the mystery that haunted a county for decades, because behind that wall was a room no one knew existed, and inside that room was something he'd seen before: 3 small beds, 3 sets of clothes, and something scratched into the wooden floor. We are not gone. Nathan didn't move. He just stood there, staring into the hollow dark behind the wall, dust in his throat, sweat beating cold down his back. 3 beds, tiny wooden, identical in shape, but faded by time, 1 blanket on each, folded with impossible care, as if waiting. On the back wall, scratched deep into the old wood, were the names: Emma, Eliza, Eli. He stumbled down the attic stairs, vomited on the porch, and called 911. The sheriff's department, a different one than in 1987, dispatched 2 deputies and a crime scene tech. They asked him to leave the property until a full forensic sweep could be done. He sat in his car, didn't blink, didn't speak, just stared through the windshield at the roofline that had kept secrets for 2 decades. The attic wasn't listed on the original floor plan. The room, he discovered, didn't even exist on public record. But when investigators entered, they found what he already knew. This wasn't storage. It was a holding cell. No windows, no ventilation. The only exit? The panel Nathan broke open. There was a bucket in the corner, empty food cans, a child's drawing of a rabbit, and in the center, a tattered yellow teddy bear, missing 1 eye. They called it the nursery, but it was nothing like a place for sleep, more like something built to hold them, to hide them, to make them forget time existed. The triplets' DNA was confirmed within days. Hair strands, skin cells, even traces of saliva on the spoons found beneath the beds. They had lived there, after the storm, after the disappearance, which meant the impossible. They hadn't vanished into the woods. They hadn't drowned. They hadn't been taken by strangers. They had been here the whole time, inside the house. The sheriff's office called it a catastrophic failure of investigation. The media called it a horror story. Nathan, he called it betrayal, because all those years, he blamed himself for not locking the window, not hearing a noise, not stopping it. But the noise was never outside. It came from inside the walls. The structure of the hidden room suggested planning. The nails were hammered from the inside, so it couldn't be opened from the other side. The boards were thick, triple reinforced. Soundproof insulation lined behind wallpaper. Even the light fixture was fake, a bulb wired to nothing. The assumption had always been abduction. But this wasn't a kidnapping. This was containment. The floorboards told more of the story. Faint scratch marks lined the inside of the doorframe. 1 clawed so deeply it pierced through to the next board. And across one wall, hidden beneath a layer of mold, were lines. Hundreds of them. Carved in rows, counted in 5s, days, tracked like prison time. 1 set reached 247, another 362, and the third stopped at just 89. 3 counts, 3 children, 3 different fates. They found no remains, no bones, no blood, but in a crevice between the wall boards, they found a single tooth, a molar, too small to be Nathan's, and too new to have been there before the room was sealed. Forensics estimated the room was in use for at least 6 months after the disappearance. The food cans had expiration dates from 1987 to early 1988. But after that, nothing. No trash, no footprints, only silence and dust. The town of Larkspur spiraled. People demanded answers. But the old sheriff was long dead, and most of the 1987 records were gone, either lost, misplaced, or destroyed in a flood in 1994. Only fragments remained. But one document survived, an anonymous tip, called in 3 days after the storm. The caller said, "They're not missing. He put them where no one would look." The dispatcher wrote it off as a hoax, filed it, forgot it, but now they wanted to know, who was he? The initial assumption was Henry, the father, but nothing in his record suggested malice. No abuse, no psychological issues, until they dug deeper. In 1985, 2 years before the storm, Henry Delaney was arrested for trespassing on government property, a research facility, defunct since the 70s, outside Asheville. He said he was just exploring. Charges were dropped, but in his wallet at the time, they found a photo, not of his children, of a blueprint, a building plan, a room, roughly 8 by 10 feet, no windows, single entrance. It matched the attic room perfectly. The blueprint was traced to a long-dismantled behavioral center, Renshaw Institute for Child Correction, supposedly a mental health facility for minors, but former employees alleged it ran unsanctioned programs. Quiet training, they called it, designed to suppress willpower, to reduce reaction, to teach obedience through deprivation. Some of the tactics? Extended isolation, sensory deprivation, denial of names, identity fragmentation. Renshaw was shut down in 1982, but before its closure, Henry Delaney had been employed there, not as a therapist, not as a janitor, as a contractor, in charge of retrofitting rooms, soundproofing, modifying walls, building what he called containment environments. He'd built the blueprint, and then he brought it home. The triplets weren't random victims. They were his subjects. But the question that tore through the investigation was, why? What did he want to prove? What was he testing? And why 3? Why isolate them? Some said he had snapped. Some said he was conducting his own continuation of the Renshaw trials. But Nathan believed something else, that his father had been part of something larger, something that never fully ended, because the blueprints weren't hand-drawn. They bore a stamp, property of KBI, Behavioral Division, a branch that didn't officially exist, not under any federal program, not in any public directory. The stamp looked faded, almost burned, like someone had tried to erase it. But secrets don't stay buried forever. Not when there are names carved into wood. Not when a brother comes back. Not when a storm passes and leaves something behind. And Nathan knew now, the house hadn't just been a place of pain. It had been a lab. And his siblings, they were more than victims. They were data. But if that was true, where were they now? Because he hadn't found bones. He hadn't found bodies. He'd found a room, and a message scratched into floorboards. We are not gone. They weren't gone. That's what the floorboard said. We are not gone. But where were they? No bodies. No blood. Just beds. Drawings. Scratches. Cans of food dated to the early months of 1988. Then nothing. Nathan couldn't stop thinking about the scratch marks, the way they curved in on themselves, like small hands clawing toward light they never reached. He had returned for closure, for demolition. Instead, he had reopened a door to something he didn't know how to close. The attic room wasn't just a hiding place. It was a test chamber. And his father, Henry, the man who had read them bedtime stories, who had fixed bikes and kissed scraped knees, had also built that prison. But for what? The more Nathan read about the Renshaw Institute, the darker the picture became. It wasn't a correctional facility. It was a behavioral lab, disguised as one. And while it was shut down in 1982, its influence didn't die there. Archived court documents, buried in legal databases and unlisted settlements, revealed that Renshaw had been part of something larger, a privately funded initiative known as KBI, short for Kinetic Behavioral Initiative, an experimental program built on the theory that the human mind could be reshaped by controlled deprivation. They weren't trying to hurt children. They were trying to erase them and then rebuild. Children were taught to forget their names, to stop responding to light, to obey coded commands. And Henry? He'd helped design the architecture of those trials. Soundproof chambers, concealed doors, manual signal switches. And now, the same blueprint was inside Nathan's childhood home, in the attic, in the walls, in the very place he used to play hide and seek. The sheriff reopened the cold case. Nathan became a de facto consultant, not because he was a detective, but because he knew the layout better than anyone. He knew where the floor creaked, which boards were hollow, where his father had once gone when no one was watching. Together, they found more. Behind the bedroom wall, a second compartment. Inside it, cassette tapes, unlabeled when played. Each began with a number. Subject E1, day 17. Subject E2, day 23. Subject E3, day 89. And then silence, not total silence. The kind that hums, the kind that feels alive. Underneath the hum, faint breathing, a shuffle, a sob, a whisper. On tape 7, a voice, a child's, whimpering. Then clearer, "Brother, you forgot us." Nathan collapsed. He hadn't expected that voice. High, uncertain, still full of life, and filled with the kind of betrayal no child should ever learn to speak. The FBI joined the investigation. One agent recognized the structure in the tapes. The codes, E1, E2, E3, matched Renshaw's designation for isolation subjects, each one assigned based on temperament. E1 compliant, E2 defiant, E3 nonverbal. It aligned with what Nathan remembered. Emma, quiet. Eliza, the rebellious twin. Eli, still barely speaking at 4 years old. Each child had been observed, categorized, conditioned, not by strangers, by their own father. Nathan demanded to know why. No one could give him an answer. The case was sealed. The funding sources disappeared. KBI wasn't on any public registry. But then, a break. A journalist from Durham, researching experimental trauma programs, contacted Nathan. He had proof, a black binder, found in an estate sale. Label, KBI Phase 2. Stamped, classified, destroy after use. Inside, employee rosters, room designs, test descriptions, subject progress logs. And on page 11, a list titled, Approved In-Home Trial Sites, 1986 to 1989. Line 7. Delaney H., Larkspur County, NC. 3 subjects assigned. Control, internal. Observation, ongoing. Termination, optional. Termination, optional. Nathan vomited. His siblings hadn't just vanished. They had been assigned. By name, by number, by location. And the government, or some faceless agency wrapped in the shroud of private funding, had signed off on it. The question now wasn't where did they go. It was, did someone come back for them? Because in the records, there was a notation beside each subject's name. E1, graduation pending. E2, subject refused reentry. E3, reassignment failed, status unknown. Graduation, reentry, reassignment. It sounded like school, like promotions, but these were children in cages. So what did those words really mean? And one more detail chilled Nathan to his core. Each file included an ID photograph of the child. During training, Emma looked older than 4, closer to 7, tired eyes, blank expression. Eliza's photo was redacted, a line across her face, a warning stamped, non-compliant, flagged. Eli's photo was missing. Only the silhouette remained. But the worst part? The final page, marked in red. Phase 2 concluded. Facility collapse. Subject recovery failed. Declaration, non-essential loss. Non-essential. That's what they were to this program, to the people who built it, funded it, buried it. 3 children, 3 minds, 3 lives, labeled as test data. Nathan knew now. The storm wasn't the reason they disappeared. It was the cover, the chaos that let his father carry them upstairs, one by one, locked them inside a room no one would search, and begin the experiment he thought would save the world or himself. And when the project collapsed, no one came for them, not even him. But that final message still clawed at him. We are not gone. Was it a plea? A threat? A truth? Because what if one of them survived? What if they escaped? And what if, for the last 20 years, someone had been watching him back? After the files surfaced, Nathan stopped sleeping. He wandered the empty farmhouse at night, flashlight in hand, retracing the spaces his siblings once crawled through. It wasn't guilt anymore. It was something else. A pull, like the house wasn't just hiding answers. It was waiting for him to ask the right questions. The attic room was sealed off by authorities. But Nathan had kept one thing, the drawing. Crayon on paper, taped behind one of the beds. It showed 3 stick figures, standing in a row, holding hands. Each wore a red dot on their chest. Each had no face. And below, written in shaky letters, "We are still U.S." Still us. Not changed. Not broken. Still inside. Somewhere. That message was never meant for investigators. It was meant for him. He went back to the tapes. Listened again. One caught him off guard. A short clip. Just 4 words. "Brother, come find me." The voice was different this time. Older. Clearer. Not a 4-year-old. Not a memory. A message. Could they still be alive? Was it possible one or more of them had escaped? If so, where did they go? He started digging through missing person records. Not ones from 1987. From the 2000s. Specifically, children found with no origin, no birth certificate, no hospital records. Just dropped into the system, usually with vague stories or total memory gaps. In 2008, he found her, Anna Marie Davis, located in rural Virginia, found wandering in 2005, barefoot, mute, covered in scratches. She was 8 when found, but medical records suggested she was closer to 10. No family, no identity. She was placed in a foster home, where she remained silent for 2 years, until one day she whispered a name. Eli. Nathan called the agency. He posed as a journalist, got her case number, got a photo. It stopped him cold. Same dimples, same jawline, same eyes he saw in the mirror every day. He knew she was one of them. But which one? Emma? Eliza? He called again, this time honestly. Told them who he was, why he was searching. He expected to be dismissed. Instead, the social worker paused, said, "You need to come in." There's something she drew. We didn't know what it meant until now. When he arrived, they handed him a folder. Inside, a page from a coloring book. The picture, a house on a hill. But what she had drawn beneath it was what mattered. 3 excess, 1 attic window, and a man standing outside, facing away. On the roof, a message, written in block letters, upside down. You weren't supposed to see. He met her that afternoon. She didn't speak at first, just stared, until he whispered, "Emma?" She blinked, whispered back, "We waited for you." He collapsed, sobbing, not because he had answers, because he finally had a name. Emma had survived. She couldn't explain how, but through bits and fragments, she told him what she remembered. A tunnel beneath the wall. A man in the dark. Not their father. Someone else. The man had no smell, no voice, just metal hands. She said he blinked with his mouth. Nathan didn't understand. Neither did the psychologist. Was it trauma? A dream? Or something stranger? She said she woke up in a truck. The windows were black. She screamed. No one answered. Then she was dropped off in a field. That was it. Her story ended there. Nathan asked about the others. Emma went silent. Tears welled. She reached for his hand. and whispered. Eliza wouldn't stop fighting. Eli never opened his eyes again. They were gone. She was the last. But something still didn't sit right, because if Eliza had fought and Eli had gone silent, who took Emma? Nathan brought her back to Larkspur, not to live, to visit, to stand on the porch of the house they once shared. She didn't flinch, didn't cry, just stared, and whispered, "He's still here." Inside the house, they stood beneath the attic stairs. Emma refused to go up. She pointed to the floor, said, "He walked there every night when you were asleep." Nathan remembered hearing footsteps as a kid. His father used to say it was just the pipes. But pipes don't wear boots. Emma said she never saw his face, only his hand. He fed them, watched them, then disappeared again. But it wasn't Henry. She was sure. Dad cried. The other one didn't. There had been someone else. Another presence. Another participant. Another monster. Nathan gave this info to the FBI. They searched for others who worked with Henry during the time of the disappearance. One name emerged. A man named Victor Hensley, former colleague at Renshaw, dismissed in 1981 for unauthorized methods, disappeared in 1986, presumed dead, but then came a lead, a P.O. box in his name, still active in rural West Virginia. The agents intercepted a package. Inside, old notebooks, a key, and a single chilling phrase. Phase 2 remained viable. Phase 2, that was Emma. The FBI launched a full search of the area. Found a cabin, remote, overgrown, near a dried-up stream bed. Inside, nothing. Empty, except a door in the floor, locked from the outside. Inside the crawl space, 3 small mattresses, 1 stuffed rabbit, and a wall smeared with crayon. Words scrawled repeatedly. Stay still, stay quiet, stay empty. And a drawing. 3 children. Only one with a face. And the one with the face was walking away. Emma. She had been brought here, kept alive, watched, trained, and then released. For what purpose? No one knows. Nathan stared at the wall and realized something terrifying. They didn't lose her. They let her go, which meant somewhere out there, someone was still in control, still watching, still deciding who gets found and who gets left behind. Emma never cried, not when she walked back into the house, not when she saw the attic door, not even when she stood at the edge of the crawl space in West Virginia, looking down into the dark. She just watched, as if she were still being tested, still waiting for someone to say, "You passed." The FBI couldn't explain the cabin. There were no property records, no prints, no neighbors within 10 miles, only the crayon writing on the walls, and a box buried under floorboards. Inside, a journal, a rusted audio recorder, and a single Polaroid. It showed 3 children sitting in a circle, 2 with their backs turned. The third, a girl, stared directly at the lens, expression blank, eyes distant, and on her shirt, written in marker, E1, Emma. The journal confirmed it. This wasn't a rescue. It wasn't a kidnapping. It was a release, a trial run, a phase 2 escape scenario. The entries were cold, clinical, E2 rejected protocol, escape containment, sedated, terminated, E3 non-responsive, no language retention, no survival instinct, marked obsolete. E1 adapts, mimics affection, obeys commands, release viable. It wasn't survival. It was selection. Only one of the triplets was ever meant to walk away. The others, they were control groups. Nathan broke. He punched the wall, collapsed into the dirt. The rabbit they found in the crawl space had Eliza's name stitched into the ear. She'd kept it with her until the end, and no one would ever find her again. Emma stayed quiet. She held the photo, looked at the version of herself that had no memory, no voice, and whispered, "They made me forget her. I didn't mean to, but they made me forget." Nathan sat beside her, eyes burning. "It wasn't your fault." She shook her head, "But they wanted it to be." The FBI reopened the KBI files. Now it confirmed connections to 3 other missing children cases, all from the 1980s. Each involved siblings. Each ended with one survivor. Each survivor had the same mark behind the ear, a scar, small, circular, puckered, almost surgical. The press started using a name, the one left behind, a cruel phrase, but accurate because it became clear. These weren't crimes of opportunity. They were designed endings. Each test chamber had a goal: to isolate a subject, break identity, and test resilience under deprivation. Only one child per group was meant to survive reentry. The others, they served as emotional ballast, tools to measure connection, to measure pain, to measure how much one child could endure before they detached completely. In short, the others were meant to die so that one could live and forget. Emma was that one. But there was more. The tapes found in the Delaney attic were decoded. Some weren't audio at all. They were data tapes. When converted, they showed logs, vitals, response times, and names, but not of the children, of the observers. One name stood out: Dr. Valerie Knorr, former neuroscientist at a behavioral institute in Tennessee. Last known record, 1989. After that, she vanished until 2004, when her name reappeared as a donor to a biotech startup in Delaware. The name of the company? Phoenix Interface. Their tagline? Redesigning behavior from the brain out. Nathan knew they hadn't stopped the program. They just changed the name, changed the faces. Phoenix Interface was real, still active, still listed as a behavioral consulting firm. But when agents tried to contact them, the address led to a shuttered warehouse. No records, no employees, just one paper taped to the locked door. We are still U.S. Emma had never seen the message, but when shown the photo, she nodded. That's what we said when they told us we were broken. That's what Eliza screamed. Pieces clicked into place. The entire ordeal, the attic, the crawl space, the tapes, wasn't random. It was a funnel, and the one who survived, they carried the data forward. In memory, in behavior, in scars. Nathan finally asked Emma, "Do you remember how you got out?" She hesitated, then whispered. He opened the door. "Dad." She shook her head. No, the man with no voice. Victor Hensley. His name had vanished from the FBI's active file list. But one last lead surfaced. A gas station camera in Maryland. 2006. A man buying batteries and soup, dressed in old military gear, wearing gloves. But the cashier said he had burns on his face, like he'd been caught in an explosion. The timestamp? 2 days after Emma was found. Hensley had been there, had watched her released, and walked away. The agents now believed he may have been the last handler of Phase 2, and that Emma's release was an escape. It was a benchmark. Test complete. Subject viable. But viable for what? Emma started drawing again, for the first time in years. Not pictures of houses, but of rooms. Blueprints. Identical to the attic. Identical to the cabin. Identical to the files. She remembered every inch. Not from memory. From design. Because the final reveal came from a neurologist. Emma agreed to an fMRI brain scan. The doctor said, it's like she's wired for architecture. But not just buildings. Emotional structure. How people respond to space. She could remember patterns. Map behaviors. Predict fear responses. All learned through isolation conditioning. She wasn't just surviving. She had been rebuilt. Nathan wept. His sister wasn't broken. She was something else entirely. And the final horror? The psychiatrist reviewing Emma's profile said something Nathan will never forget. She wasn't the goal. She was a prototype, which meant others came next. Children tested, trained, released, built not to remember, built to adapt, built to blend. Emma sat beside Nathan on their old porch. She looked at the trees, the same woods from that stormy night in 1987, and said, "Do you think the others are out there? Like me?" Nathan nodded. I think you were never alone. And she smiled, not because she was happy, but because she finally believed it, that her story wasn't over, that she was never supposed to survive, but she did, and she wasn't the only one. In the end, it wasn't the answers that hurt most. It was the spaces between them, the silences that had never been broken, the rooms no one remembered building, the names no one was supposed to speak again. The house in Larkspur still stood. Nathan never tore it down. He said it didn't feel right. Not after what was found. Not after what was lost. Instead, he had it sealed, room by room, floor by floor, and at the top of the attic stairs, he placed a plaque. It read, "This was not a grave, but it held the dead." Emma visits once a year, never for long, just enough to stand on the porch, touch the railing, watch the trees sway in the wind. She never cries, but sometimes she hums. A song no one taught her, a tune no one recognizes, a melody that sounds like memory. In 2012, Emma testified before a federal oversight committee. Her words were soft, measured. She described the walls, the rules, the experiments. One congressman asked her if she remembered how long she was kept. She said, "Time didn't move in there, so I stopped too." They asked her what she wanted from the government. She replied, "A name for what they did." That's what was taken, more than her siblings, more than her childhood, her identity. Because what do you call someone who was born, erased, rebuilt, and returned? A survivor? A product? A prototype? She calls herself Emma now. But in the files, she was E1. In the tape logs, subject read. And in the final pages of the KBI binder, she had one last designation. Asset approved, emotional neutrality threshold achieved. That line shook the panel, because it meant she hadn't just survived trauma. She'd passed a test. The committee closed quietly. No prosecution. No names released. The remaining documents were sealed. Again, but Emma kept going. She started sketching again, not houses now, but faces. Hundreds of them. Not all were human. Some were distorted. Mouths too wide. Eyes blank. When asked, she said, "That's what they looked like when they watched us." Nathan moved to the city. Tried to let go. But he still visits, still keeps a candle in his window each March, the month of the storm. 3 flames, one for each name, and sometimes he swears he hears knocking in the attic, even when no one's home. Emma is 38 now. She works in architectural forensics. She helps rebuild what's been destroyed. She says it feels right, like closure in reverse, like learning how to unhide things. She's never found Eliza or Eli. The woods gave no answers. The foundation beneath the cabin held no remains. Just whispers. Just scars. But one night, late, she got a package. No return address. Inside, a VHS tape. No label. Just a piece of string tied around it. Read. She played it. Static. Then sound. A child humming. Then a voice, soft, broken. "I remember the sky. I thought maybe you did too." And then silence. She never showed it to Nathan. Said it felt sacred, like a goodbye, or a warning. The man known as Victor Hensley was never found. Some say he died in the explosion that leveled the Renshaw facility. Others say he's still out there, watching, waiting, building. Phoenix Interface rebranded in 2016. New name, Novus Biotech. Same mission, behavioral enhancement solutions. Same funding groups. Same partners. Different story. And Emma? She filed a lawsuit, not to win, just to put her name in the record, to remind them that she exists, that she remembers, that they failed. She lost the case. But when the judge dismissed it, Emma stood up and said, "You can't erase what already knows it was erased." And the courtroom went silent, because everyone knew she wasn't wrong. The storm that swallowed the Triplets in 1987 didn't just flood the county. It changed the weather inside them, left them scattered, one buried in memory, one drowned in rebellion, and one set free not to live, but to carry the test forward. she's still carrying it. In her hands, in her steps, in her voice. Not just the story, the design. Because once a child has learned to live without identity, without warmth, without even sound, they become something else. Not cold, not cruel, but unshakable. Like a house with no windows, a name with no letters, a mind that remembers being rebuilt and still finds its way home. Emma told a journalist once, "I don't dream much, but when I do, it's always raining." She doesn't remember the last thing Eliza said, or the last time she touched Eli's hand, but she remembers the dark, the hum, the silence, and a moment, maybe imagined, when a voice said, "You passed." They thought she wouldn't remember. They were wrong, because she still knows the sound of the door closing. And now, she leaves it open, just in case someone else remembers too.